I promise you, it's going to do something to you. It's going to permanently change your brain chemistry. It will awaken something in you. You will be forever changed from reading through the point of view of Gideon Knopf. Hello and welcome back to this channel. Today we're going to be talking about something very exciting, which is the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. I don't know how you say her name. I'm very new to this phenomenon of a series. I just blew through all 3 of these books. It's not finished yet. The last one has yet to come out. And I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to be sharing those with you today. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have a non-spoilery part. This video might be split up into 2 videos, but still watch at your own discretion. I can't promise that I won't hint or allude to spoilers when I give the non-spoilery part, because it's kind of hard not to. I also need to give a quick disclaimer for this video. If I sound or look like shit, it's because I am sick. I have a very nasty cold that I am still trying to get over, and it's probably not the best idea for me to try to film a video right now, but you know, what am I gonna do? Just wait even longer to talk about this? I can't. I've been wanting to talk about it since I fucking started reading these books, so we're just doing this. I'm gonna try to cut out my coughs. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, strap in. This is gonna be a very exciting time. It's exciting for me because I have a lot of thoughts. So first I need to talk about why I picked up the series. So, or maybe I should explain what the series is about. I don't know. Okay, I didn't think this through. So this is a science fantasy series, which means it's a blend of science fiction and fantasy. So science fiction in the way that it is kind of set very far off in the future, and there's elements of space travel. The fantasy element is that there's also magic, specifically magic in the form of necromancy. So these books are all about necromancy as a magic system, which is very interesting because you think of necromancy as just bringing people back from the dead. This series kind of conceives of necromancy as this whole magic system that deals with using death energy and life energy. So there's an energy to death, which in this world is called thanergy, and an energy to life, which is called thalergy. And necromancers have the ability to manipulate thanergy and thalergy. So Gideon the Ninth is the first book. This book follows our main character, Gideon, who lives in the 9th house. So in this world, we have kind of a solar system of planets, and each planet is called a house. In my mind, it was easy to compare it to the Hunger Games, how there's 12 different districts, and each district has a thing that they do for the capital, the government. That's kind of what the 9 houses, which are planets, are. Each house kind of has a thing that it specializes in. For the first house, which is the government. Gideon lives in the 9th house, and the 9th house is responsibility is that they are guarding the tomb. The tomb is something you don't really know much about it going in, but you know that it's important. So Gideon is an indentured servant of the 9th house. So she just kind of showed up there as a child. She was just kind of abandoned there. She is has been abused and subjugated her whole life. Her nemesis, her lifelong nemesis, is this other girl named Harrow Hark, who is the reverend daughter. So she's the heir to the throne of the 9th house. Each house has their own kind of royalty, and Harrow is the heir to the 9th house. And so Harrow and Gideon have a very taut relationship. They hate each other. Gideon is trying to escape. She's just trying to get the fuck out of there. But she can't. Her plan gets thwarted, and she ends up instead having to go on this adventure where the emperor has called the royalty from all of the houses to go to the first house to basically kind of like, it's unclear whether it's going to be like a competition or like a trial or a challenge of some sort, but they're going to have to go through something in order to see if they can prove themselves and become what is called a lictor, which is some kind of like immortal, powerful, like servant of the emperor, who they also call God. By the way, the emperor is God. That's important. So in order to be that, they have to travel to the first house and do this kind of challenge trial thing. So it's like the heir of each of the houses and their cavaliers. So the cavalier is kind of like the knight slash bodyguard slash like personal fighter. So like if there's a duel, the cavalier like duels for the necromancer heir. Also, all the heirs are necromancers, I should make that clear. The heir to each of the thrones of the planets are some kind of necromancer, right? And so the cavaliers are like their personal bodyguard slash fighter. Basically, Gideon has to fill the role of cavalier for Harrow as they go on this like mission to the first house and prove themselves so that Harrow can become a lictor. Okay, so that is the plot synopsis, I guess. I'm sorry, this is like so long. I'm so bad at this. Of Gideon the Ninth. Okay, so let me talk about how I got into this series. I am still very active on a website known as Tumblr. On Tumblr, I mostly am just like there for books and fandoms and all of that. I am a very big fan of I don't know if I have it behind me. Oh, I do. I have my special edition Raven Cycle, the Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater books slash the spinoff to that, which is the Dreamer trilogy. I did a video about Grey Warren. If you're interested, it's on my channel. And for some reason, the whole fandom of the Raven Cycle on Tumblr is also very obsessed with this series. And so it's kind of become like my fandom by proxy. Whereas like, I don't really know anything about it. Like before I got into it, I didn't really know anything about it except that I would see like, you know, posts about it. And so I was kind of like just absorbing whatever everyone else that I followed like was posting about it. And so I had this like kind of preconceived idea of what the series was going to be. And so I definitely had to like adjust my expectations going into this book. I knew that it was very gay. I mean, that is like probably the main selling point. I mean, I think it even says like lesbian necromancers explore a haunted gothic palace in space. Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect other than that it's gay. It's some kind of fantasy, and I know that everyone who is obsessed with the Raven Cycle is obsessed with it, which didn't tell me a lot. Other than that, it's probably going to be really like unhinged and like make me insane, because that's what the Raven Cycle does to me. I want to know what the reason is for that fandom like intertwining, because they could not be more different in terms of genre. But anyway, so I didn't really know what to expect. I thought that it was honestly going to be more romance heavy. That was probably the biggest adjustment. So I will say, if you are caught by the lesbian tagline and you're like, oh my god, it's gonna be like a steamy lesbian romance novel, like, it's not. Okay, it is very gay. Okay, these books are very queer in general, but they're not queer in the way of like being very like steamy and romancy, more in just like the way of the characters themselves just exhibiting and exuding and bleeding and breathing queerness in a very, very refreshing, totally like amazing way. Like, I will say it's so great, and that's probably like my biggest like honestly still is the biggest reason why I'm glad I read these books. But adjust your expectations if you are expecting, like, right off the bat to have some, like, romance, because you're not. There is some, but it's like, you gotta have patience. You gotta have patience. That was the main thing also for this book. When I was reading it, I honestly, like, wasn't, like, in love with it at first. Like, it kind of had this weird effect on me where, like, the process of actually reading the book, I don't feel like I was, like, obsessed with it or really enjoying it even that much until, like, the last, like, fifth of the book. But, like, after I finished it, I, like, became obsessed with it. And I was like, that was the best book I've ever read. And then I started the second one and I was like, oh my God, this is the best series I've ever read. And, like, I was, like, missing the first book and wishing I had appreciated it more. It was just really weird. It was kind of like this retroactive, like, love for it that kicked in. And I think, I think the biggest thing is that my expectations were skewed. I was expecting more romance, and I was kind of unprepared for the amount of attention you have to pay to the plot. I will say for the first book, it's kind of okay. I mean, I did this because I am not good at paying attention to plots in general. I kind of just, like, let the plot fly in through one ear and out of the other and didn't pay that much attention to it. And I still enjoyed the book, and I was still able to pick up the details in the second book. I do think it's a series you have to take your time with. Even if, like, the first read through you don't pick up on everything, I think that's okay, because I think when you continue the series, there will be details that will come back and things, like, start making sense afterwards. Like, that's the biggest thing, is, like, I could not even tell you what the fuck happened in this book after I finished it. But then, like, the more time passed afterwards, like, the more things started, like, clicking into place. And I think that's true for, like, the whole series. Like, you kind of just have to trust that the author knows what she's doing, and she does. I believe that she does, because she's fucking crazy and amazing. But, like, you have to trust that everything is going to make sense without, like, needing it to make sense right now, which is very hard for me, I have to say, because I like things to make sense, like, right here, right now, and I get frustrated. So that was, like, the biggest reason why I kind of didn't love this book when I was, like, reading it initially, is because there's a shit ton of characters, okay? You have 8 different houses all competing / going through these challenges, right? And there's 2 people from each, well, 3 from one, but there's, like, at least 2 characters from each house. So you have, like, 16, 17, like, characters to keep track of, and it's a lot. And I honestly, like, could not keep track of them throughout this book. So that was kind of another thing that was difficult for me. But once I got into, like, the last quarter of this book, that's when things really started to, like, kick in, and that's when I was like, okay, now I get why people are obsessed with this, because there is definitely, like, a turning point, which is why I say you have to have patience with these books, because everything becomes, like, everything pays off. Like, you think, like, what is the point of this? Like, why are we going through this? Why do we have to have all of these different characters? What the fuck are they doing? I don't understand. What is the point? Everything pays off. Like, I promise you, it pays off. You just have to have, like, patience and trust, which I don't have. So that was very hard for me. The last quarter of this book, everything started, like, clicking into place, and it was just like, oh my God, I loved it. I loved it. I will say my main takeaway, and the reason, if I was to talk to myself, my past self, and give myself a reason to read this book, I would say, forget everything that you think you know about this series, okay? Forget all the reasons that people have told you to read it or that you've heard about it. If for nothing else, the reason that you should read this book is because I promise you, you need to experience reading from the point of view of a goofy, hot, confident, ridiculous butch lesbian main character. I promise you, it's going to do something to you. It's going to permanently change your brain chemistry. It will awaken something in you. You will be forever changed from reading through the point of view of Gideon Knopf. That is the biggest reason you should read this book, okay? Is because the characters, the main characters, the point of view was so refreshing and unlike anything I have honestly ever read before. And that, honestly, in and of itself, regardless of what the fuck the plot did, regardless of anything else, that to me made this book worth it. Because I have never, honestly, in my life, ever read a book told from the point of view of a character like Gideon. And I mean that in terms of her personality. I think it was Carrie Can Read said that, like, Gideon kind of has the personality that you would expect in, like, a goofy, like, side character, and you don't really ever get them as, like, the main character point of view. And I think that that's really true. Like, you would kind of think that she's, like in any other story, she would be a very one-dimensional, like, comic relief kind of side character. But to have her as the main character gives her not only, like, a lot of depth and, like, nuance to that, like, goofiness that we might kind of just, like, dismiss in any other book, but it also makes, like, it makes it so much fun to read this, like, complicated fantasy dark kind of plot through this kind of, like, humorous lens. And also, like, the thing that is mind-blowing to me that I haven't read before, like, even though I feel like I read a lot of queer books and I feel like I try to read books with lesbian main characters, I don't think I've ever read a straight up, like, butch point of view before. And that's, like, really distressing to me to realize. So if you have any recommendations for other books, regardless of if they're romance, fantasy, whatever, that are just told from the point of view of a butch lesbian main character, I will love you forever, because I have honestly never read from that point of view before. And it, like, did something to me. I don't know. Like, it was so refreshing. It made me so happy. I feel like, because I don't know. I could probably talk about this forever. I feel like whenever we get female point of views, right, especially in, like, young adult, it's usually, like, a girl who's, like, insecure. Like, she's maybe, like, all the boys think she's pretty, but she's, like, insecure, and she's like, I'm just an ordinary girl, like, and nobody really likes me. I'm so plain, you know, but I'm so plain, but I'm also so not like other girls, or whatever, you know. Or even if it is, like, someone who's really confident, she's confident in herself because she's, like, very feminine. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a confident femme person. Like, I love and respect that 100%, you know. But I'm thinking kind of like the, like, Isabel Lightwood type of character, if you're familiar with The Mortal Instruments, where it's, like, you know, kind of, like, badass, sexy, like, fighting in my high heels kind of thing, you know? And, like, that can be great. That can be super empowering for people. But, like, I just feel like Gideon showed me a part of myself I didn't even know was in me, if that makes sense. Like, I've never seen in any book, especially in a fantasy series, to have a main character who is not traditionally feminine in any way, who's still very clearly a woman, super confident in herself and, like, thinks that she's hot shit, and she's right, like, she is hot shit, and is, like, confident in her, like, just in who she is, in a way that doesn't, like, rely on external validation, especially from, like, the male gaze. I'm probably not putting this into words the best way that I could, but I just think it is, like, so refreshing and so beautiful. And so, like, if you are queer in any way, or questioning, or if you're just a really good ally and you just, like, want to experience reading from the point of view of a butch, badass lady, then please read this book. Please read this book. Please. You will not regret it. You will not regret it. do it for her. do it for her, if nothing else. Okay? If I was gonna rate like these books on Goodreads, which I haven't done yet, but I will after this, I'd probably give Gideon 4 stars just because my experience of reading it, like I said, was not totally that enjoyable because I was so lost in the plot and like so kind of not expecting it to be so plot heavy. If I was to reread it, honestly, it might be 5 stars, but when I was reading it, the experience I had and the fact that I had such a hard time keeping things straight and like kind of also had a hard time just like envisioning things happening, because it's not that the writing isn't good, but it's just that I don't feel like we're given a lot of like exposition into like how the magic works, so that whenever scenes are explained where there's magic happening, it's using like lingo and vocabulary that I don't understand, and so it's very hard for me to picture it. Like it kept saying like the construct, and I didn't know what a construct was. A construct is just like a magical like thing. I don't know. I still don't know how to describe it. Like a bone construct would be like a skeleton that you are controlling, I guess. I don't know. It was just like things like that where I just like I didn't know what words meant and I couldn't really picture it. So for that reason, I would give Gideon 4 stars. Now, Harrow, the 9th, is the sequel, who we mainly follow, the other part of the duo that we explore in this book, right? Which is Harrow Hark, Nona. This is definitely a 5-star book. This book blew my mind, dude. I will say, I'm going to try to say this in the most non-spoilery way possible. If you finish Gideon and you go to pick up Harrow, be forewarned, okay? You might have to adjust your expectations if you want to see like what happens in their relationship immediately after this book. You're gonna have to adjust your expectations, because this book, honestly, it kind of felt like a prequel in ways. It definitely takes place after the first book, but it's more so exploring Harrow and her life and her as a character, her character development. And so you kind of have to think of it like a prequel. That's how I had to think of it, because you're not, in terms of the relationship, if you're in deep for like the relationship between these characters, you kind of have to think of this as like, this book isn't, I mean, it is a continuation of their relationship, but it's mostly a look into Harrow herself as a character. So think of it like that. And also know that when you start reading this book and you start feeling crazy, you are experiencing it correctly. If you read this book and you start to feel like you're losing your mind, that's how you're supposed to be feeling. This book will gaslight you and then ungaslight you and then rip your heart out of your chest. And it's beautiful. It is. But I will say, if you're like me and you kind of get like I feel like this is maybe a little bit of like a trigger warning. Like if you feel like you get triggered by like not knowing what reality is, if that makes sense, if you get kind of like just really uneasy and feel unwell when you are unclear about the reality of what has happened, right? It is okay if you have to look up a spoiler to get through this book, because I had to do that, because I started to feel so insane because like I said, this book has an unreliable narrator and it will gaslight you. It will make you think that stuff that happened in this book didn't happen. And you'll be like, what the fuck is going on? That's okay. That's what's supposed to be happening. You're not losing your mind. What you read did happen. You didn't hallucinate it. But now you're getting it from a different perspective, and it's going to be different, and there's a reason for it. But if you need to look up a spoiler to save yourself the sanity, just do it. I did it, and honestly, it made this book so much more enjoyable. If I hadn't looked up the spoiler, and you'll know what spoiler it is, I'm just gonna say the spoiler. If I hadn't looked up the spoiler, I honestly don't think I could have enjoyed this book. I think I would have been so distraught and like distressed about not knowing what the fuck was going on that I don't think I would have really enjoyed it, at least on the first read through. But since I looked it up and I kind of knew a little bit about what was happening, it was so much easier for me to just enjoy this book for what it was. And I think it's a masterpiece. Like, I think it pulls it off beautifully. But if you get triggered by unreality and like just like being gaslit, the feeling of being gaslit, it's okay to look up a spoiler, okay? It's okay. I forgive you. You're fine. So just know that. Just know that. Just know that. But yeah, this book is amazing. It did so many crazy things. The biggest takeaway for me as a writer is that like there are so many things I didn't even know were possible that you could do with like a story structure that this book did and somehow pulled off. So yeah, this book was very inspiring to me as a writer, and the story is just, it was just masterfully done. Masterfully done. Nona, real quick, non-spoiler thoughts about Nona. Nona is definitely, so some context for how Nona came to be. This was originally supposed to be a trilogy, and Nona and the last book, Electo, which is yet to be released, were supposed to be the same book. This was supposed to be the first part of Electo the Ninth. And then Tamsin Muir realized that she had like written too much already, and it was getting to be like too long, and there was too much more story that she needed to write. And so she created Nona the Ninth as the third book, right? The last book has yet to come. So I feel like that kind of explains the vibe of this book and why this book is the way it is. I would also probably give Nona, I'd probably give it 5 stars. I don't know. I definitely think Harrow is my favorite. I don't know. Maybe I would give it 4 stars. It's kind of hard. Nona is very different. It's kind of like a total vibe shift, okay? It's, again, it kind of feels like you're reading a prequel. Like, it kind of almost feels like these books, even though they are chronological and they do follow the same story, it kind of feels like an anthology in a way, whereas like each one is its separate story following a separate character, and it kind of feels like its own separate genre. Nona is definitely like the calm before the storm. It's definitely slower in pace. You know, Gideon felt very kind of like contained within the plot of like this challenge trial thing. Harrow, the plot was a lot, well, it was more psychological, but also it kind of expanded the world a lot. So you're not just in a singular haunted space palace, but you're kind of like going all over space. But most of the drama that's happening is very psychological. Nona, you're in one place again. You're on one planet, and it feels, the genre, the vibe, the mood is kind of like a post-apocalyptic, like political war drama. It's very politics heavy. And that was honestly probably why, if I was to give it 4 stars, why I would give it 4 stars is because, again, like with heavy plot stuff, I'm not very good at following like book politics, like politics within fantasy worlds. Especially this book, I feel like it was hard to follow because we're learning everything kind of as an observer. Nona is a very interesting character. She's not in the previous two books. She's a character that kind of just comes to exist out of nowhere. She is kind of like a childlike main character in that she sees everything through this very like kind of naive point of view. And I love her. I mean, she's like honestly a wonderful, wonderful character and is so pleasant and enjoyable to read from the point of view of. But because she's kind of this childlike, naive kind of character, when we're learning stuff about the politics, we're learning it from just her overhearing bits of conversation. And she doesn't really even understand what's going on. We as the reader are expected to understand more about what's going on than the main character, which is kind of hard for me because at times I felt like she probably knew more than I did because I did not follow a lot of what happened politically. But again, you kind of just have to trust that it will all make sense in the end. And it kind of does. But yeah, this book has definitely an influence on like found family, which I loved. We definitely get to explore some new characters, which are amazing. And there's even more world expansion and like backstory. It's very information heavy. You get a lot of context, but I did really enjoy a lot of the information we did get. We learn a lot about the god emperor character. We learn a lot about how this whole world came to be. And what I love is that it connects it to our world in the present day right now. Like you basically kind of are able to make connections between like the life that we are living as human beings in this moment right now and this world and how it came to be. And I just loved that. Like it was so like there's like themes of like climate change and like just all kinds of stuff that is like super relevant that I honestly did not expect from this series. There's also a lot of really fun like gender fuckery going on in this book, which again just kind of adds to the overall queerness. So that is my thoughts on the series as a whole, non-spoilery as I can be. If any of that sounded interesting to you, you should definitely pick it up. And yeah, if you want to hear my spoilery thoughts, then please tune in to my spoiler video, which is going to be next. I'm deciding I'm probably going to cut this into 2 videos because this is already super long. So join in for my book discussion where we dive into spoilers of everything that happens in this series. But other than that, hope you pick it up and I hope you enjoy it and join me on this journey. All right. Hope to see you soon. Goodbye. Hello. Okay, let's try that again. Okay. Jesus. Off to a great start.